Now, here is my proof that by the end, Claire definitely loves Steve too. I know I've been all over the place, but believe me, regardless of how obvious it is to many people that by the end of Steve's life, Claire did start to love him too, there are still people who believe that by the end, Claire did not love Steve too. Let me streamline my reasoning and show you that Claire definitely loves Steve too by the end of his life. On the surface, I say that this is one of the oldest love storytelling tricks in the book. I grew up with a lot of Bollywood movies, and this type of love storytelling was retired mostly in Bollywood before I was even born. But to those on the fence, here's why Claire definitely loves Steve too by the end of his life, especially in Code Veronica. I'm not so sure in Darkside Chronicles because there the answer seems a bit more ambiguous. But thankfully, Darkside Chronicles is not canon. First, the body language and facial expressions. Claire seems to be getting ready to cry much more in CVX compared to DSC. Just look at how Claire says Steve when Steve is turning into a monster, along with the body language. Also, when Steve is hacking away at the bars in monster form, notice Claire's facial expression. You can see that Claire is trying not to cry. You can even sort of make out that she's starting to choke up. Claire says, "Oh, Steve," this time compared to the last two times.
Oh, Steve. Oh, Steve. Oh, Steve.
And Witch Taunter, I keep telling this, you came relatively close. Just like Scorpion, who figured out that there's something wrong with Claire in Degeneration as she appeared weaker than she was at the beginning of Code Veronica, but didn't know why. Witch Taunter, you came close because you figured out there is something about how Claire says Steve. I will clarify it right here. Yes, Claire does say Steve a lot, but it's how she says it and in what context that gives you the evidence of Claire's growing affection towards Steve that eventually turns into romantic feelings. The perfect example is in how she says, "Oh, Steve." The first time she says, "Oh, Steve,"
Oh, Steve.
this is out of sympathy because she just learned of Steve's tragic past and his family trauma. The second time she says, "Oh, Steve,"
Well, I really hope you find your brother. I know what it's like to be alone.
Oh, Steve.
this is out of empathy as she empathizes with someone who has family related loneliness just like her, but obviously to a much greater degree. The third time she says, "Oh, Steve,"
Oh, Steve.
this is due to a transition of how Claire perceived Steve at that moment. Because from that point, Steve became her love interest. Notice how slowly she comes close to Steve, gets on her side, and grabs Steve's hand, thinking that Steve was already dead. She then gently caresses Steve's face, holding his right hand with her left hand. This screams that Claire's perception of Steve at this point changed, and now she does have feelings for him. To those who feel that Claire never showed this type of feelings towards Steve, this is what you are looking for. This is the evidence that shows that Claire has romantic feelings for Steve by this point. Also, in DSC, Steve uses his left hand to caress Claire's right cheek because he loved her. So, how is it in Code Veronica when Claire is doing the same thing, caressing Steve's right cheek with her left hand, is not because Claire loved him? It isn't. Also, if you just saw this part without any context, not knowing who these two people are, you would think that this girl was about to grab the guy's
Little wiener.
and about to give this guy
a hand job.
and about to have sex.
Oh, wow! A nice old-fashioned. Yeah. Now, switch arms. You're amazing. That's it. Faster! Faster! Oh! Oh!
And yes, I confirmed this with other people. Every single person who didn't play Code Veronica, when they saw this scene, thought that Ginger Girl was turned on by naked green man.
You embarrass green things.
I had to explain to them that that's not what was happening. How did Claire not love Steve by this point in Code Veronica again? Younger brother trying to show him how to survive a biohazard. What? And the body language that insinuates that Claire was trying to grab Steve's genitals. Younger brother? And honestly, if you're going to go that route, why not go all the way like South Park?
That was unbelievable. We were meant to be, I know it. How else could sex be that incredible?
Ike made it no.
I know in reality Claire grabbed Steve's hand, but even you have to admit it looks very intimate, not familial. This entire transition phase is missing from Darkside Chronicles, meaning that Claire's perception in Darkside Chronicles from before the Steve battle to after the Steve battle didn't change. And as I have shown before, Claire watches Steve die only once in Darkside Chronicles, but twice in Code Veronica. Next, speaking of Allison Court's claim, where she says that Claire viewed Steve as a younger brother and was merely showing him how to survive a biohazard, I have shown in a previous video that this never happens in Code Veronica. In fact, in Code Veronica, Steve explicitly saves the life of Claire twice the times that Claire does the same for Steve. Steve does a lot for Claire, even finds her brother for her, and Claire couldn't save him. But Steve definitely meant something to Claire that caused her to cry harder than she ever did in any other appearance. So if it's not younger brother, the only remaining option is love interest. Also, and I forgot to highlight this earlier in my previous videos, by the time Claire and Steve escape the Antarctica base, just look at how happy Claire is. Look how big that smile is. Look how happy she sounds when she thinks that they finally made it out.
We did it! We're finally out!
Look! There's a snowmobile over there!
Perfect! We'll be able to ride right over to the Australian base with this.
Being with Steve made her this happy, and you never see her this happy ever again, ever in Resident Evil. Compare this when she escapes with Chris.
Keep my promises.
Did you hear how vapid, how hollow, how lifeless, how fake that sounded? She sounded tremendously happier escaping with Steve than escaping with Chris. This is because she lost Steve, and Steve meant something that no other person, not even Leon or Sherry or anyone else, means to her. And Claire takes Leon, Sherry, Neil, etc. as her surrogate brothers and sisters. Once again, this is missing from Darkside Chronicles. And I'm sorry, I have to interject here again because I had to update my script. Someone mentioned that Claire and Steve didn't have any chemistry, so it couldn't have been a love story. To that, I say, really? Leon and Ada had even less chemistry. Leon even scolds Ada at one point. And look at all this chemistry.
I don't think I've introduced myself yet. My name's Leon. I'm with the RPD.
Hey, I can't reach the ventilation hole. I'm going to have to find another way around. I'll catch up with you later.
What? Ada, wait! Where are you going, Ada?
To the chemical plant. I have a feeling that's where I'll find John.
Ada, wait! Hey! Man, why doesn't anyone ever listen to me? Ada! What was that all about? Running off like that was reckless and stupid. Those zombies are everywhere. Not to mention that thing that got Ben.
I was there, Leon. I know.
Heads up!
Leon, that woman was... I have to talk to her.
Did you see how much chemistry there is when Leon didn't even know how to respond when Ada opened up to him?
But you'll be in danger if you stay with me. I know I've only known you for a short period of time, but I really enjoy being with you.
Yeah, what's the empirical formula of this extremely organic compound? Third, Claire's reaction to the love confession. In Code Veronica, Capcom definitely put the love confession there in the silent part of the background music, indicating that Capcom wants this to be the main takeaway of this scene.
I love you.
In Darkside Chronicles, Steve doesn't even say it. Claire doesn't hear it, and it's not even subtitled. I have shown before, it takes about 10 seconds for Claire to even register what just happened. After that, it took another 5 to 6 seconds for Claire to realize that Steve was actually dead. In the process, she even tries to wake him up and shakes him to do so. She didn't act this way the first time she saw him die. She accepted Steve was dead then, but the second time she watches him die, Claire can't accept it. This means that she responded to the love confession, and after hearing his love confession, Claire can't accept his death. And when she finally realized that she has no choice but to accept it, she broke down crying as if she lost everything. This can only happen if she loved him too, and if she didn't know that Steve loved her until that point in the game. In her mind, Steve returned her feelings in the worst way possible. Otherwise, she wouldn't act this desperate for him to be alive after hearing his love confession. Steve wouldn't become ultra important to her after hearing his love confession when moments ago Claire already accepted Steve's death before hearing his love confession. And once again, I know the S.D. Perry novel is not canon, but S.D. Perry got it immediately. In the S.D. Perry novel, Claire was crying so hard that Chris thought Steve violated her. In DSC, Claire accepts it immediately and cries and doesn't even try to wake him up. And to those who say that Claire never said, "I love you too," I came across that as well. Leon never said that to Ada either. So Leon doesn't have feelings for Ada? In Metal Gear Solid, the ending where Meryl dies, Snake never says, "I love you." And we all know that Snake and Meryl had a romantic relationship. Both of these, by the way, shorter time than Claire and Steve knowing each other. This is more proof that by the end, Claire and Steve loved each other, as they did the same thing with Leon and Ada and Snake and Meryl. This is the formula I was talking about. Okay, the formula we saw in Resident Evil 2 and Metal Gear Solid 1. But in Code Veronica, it's the girl that survives and the guy that dies. Claire being a woman is irrelevant. And just to add to the formula and bringing back the possible sexism of some Resident Evil fans, considering how quickly Claire moved on to thinking about saving Steve right after reuniting with her brother in CVX.
But we have to get out of here.
Not yet. We have to find Steve.
Considering she charges after Alexia ahead of Chris in search of Steve in a setting that is more familiar to Chris compared to Claire, whereas in Darkside Chronicles, Chris and Claire work slowly together to find Steve, and Chris seems to take the lead.
Stay calm. We'll take them out one at a time.
And considering in Code Veronica how severely she cried and how badly she was broken by losing Steve, where in Code Veronica she didn't even have it in her to avenge him by facing Alexia, whereas she did in Darkside Chronicles, this desperation to save Steve in Code Veronica is almost as if she needed to save Steve for herself. We see this in Metal Gear Solid 1 as well, where right after Meryl gets shot by Sniper Wolf, Snake says,
I'm going to save Meryl. I don't need an excuse.
Okay.
And I'm not doing it for someone else either. I'm gonna save Meryl for myself.
and what happens when Snake fails to save Meryl and Claire fails to save Steve? Down to calling the name of the love interest 3 times before breaking down?
Meryl?
Steve?
Meryl!
Steve? Steve?
Yes, it is lazy, very poorly executed, but it is definitely a two-sided love story that ends in tragedy for Claire. If for Snake it is, and for Claire it isn't, despite all the similarities, just because Claire is a woman, then that is sexist, people. And let me semi-digress here. Speaking of the formula, and sorry to Ink Ribbon and everyone else, it's not Resident Evil 6 that confirms that Claire A, Leon B is canonical. It's Resident Evil 4, the original version. When Leon meets Ada again, he says,
So it is true.
True? About what?
You, working with Wesker.
this can only happen if Leon did research on Ada after escaping Raccoon City. And he would only do that research if he knew that Ada was alive. And he would know that Ada was alive if Leon B happened, where Ada gave Leon the rocket launcher. People, I don't mean to sound insulting. Trust me, I don't. But please use some common sense. I am still shocked that a legally blind man is figuring all of this out. Anyways, back to the formula. In Leon A, which is not canonical, he doesn't hear Ada's love confession. And this is his reaction to her death. And in Leon B, which is canonical, Leon hears Ada's love confession, and this is his reaction to her death.
I'm in love with you.
In the same way, in the non-canonical Darkside Chronicles, where Claire doesn't hear Steve's love confession, this is her non-canonical reaction.
Steve? Steve! No!
And in the canonical code Veronica X, where Claire hears Steve's love confession, this is her canonical reaction.
I love you.
Steve? Steve? Steve?
Do you see? Capcom recycled Resident Evil 2 twice with Claire. And to further add to this, look, people, please use some common sense. But look at the similarity. In Resident Evil 2, Leon's partner character first shot at Leon thinking he was a zombie.
Sorry about that. When I saw the uniform, I thought you were another zombie.
In Code Veronica, Steve also first shot at Claire thinking she was a zombie.
Huh? You're not a zombie. Well, great.
Leon tries to convince Ada that they're getting out of there together.
We're leaving this place together.
And Claire does the same thing with Steve.
Steve! Don't forget, we'll get out of here. Together.
Leon even says, "Don't die on me." And so does Claire.
Don't die on me.
Don't die on me!
Yeah, Claire said it to her brother, but it was in reference to Steve dying on her. Essentially, Steve was to Claire in Code Veronica what Ada was to Leon in Resident Evil 2. A love interest by the end of the partner character's life. If it had to be any more obvious, then you would see broken cartoon hearts emerge out of Claire during the love confession scene. This is a form of gender swapping before South Park ripped Kathleen Kennedy a new one through the Pandaverse.
Make it more lame.
Fourth, The song playing in Code Veronica at this time is called I Love You or Love. The song playing in DSC at the same time is called Final Words. This means that Capcom is screaming at you that this is a love story that ends in tragedy. Even in Resident Evil 2, the song playing at this moment is called One More Kiss. Why would they even use those names if it's not a two-sided love story? Additionally, remember in Code Veronica where Steve says something that confuses Claire, as Claire perhaps took it that Steve viewed Claire as his younger sister, as in a familial relationship?
Your brother kept his promise. I'm sorry, I cannot.
And what's the last thing that Claire says to Chris in front of Wesker?
Remember your promise.
We never see Chris promise Claire anything verbally. It's Steve who said that Chris fulfilled his brotherly promise, but he was sorry that he couldn't. In that moment, to Claire, Steve was perhaps equating his feelings for Claire in a familial way, to which Claire responds with confusion.
What are you saying?
If Claire also viewed Steve in a familial way like a brother, Claire would respond with affirmation, not confusion. It's the line after where Steve confesses his love for Claire that Claire responds so severely, not being able to accept his death. Having accepted his death less than a minute ago. The only way this is possible is if Claire actually had romantic feelings for Steve by this point. And finally, Claire seems to talk about everything with people except about Steve. And if you've seen my previous videos about the matter, you would know that there are at least 16 references to the effect of losing Steve on Claire's psyche. This further means that Steve meant something to her that no one else can mean to her. Steve is basically irreplaceable, and Claire has several surrogate brothers and sisters. I think I undersold how important this point is. Claire knows Moira Burton for several years. Claire knows Sherry Birkin for several years. Claire knows Neil Fisher for several years. Claire knows Leon for many years. And yet, given every opportunity, not a single person ever brings up Steve to her, and she never brings up Steve to anyone. And she knew Steve for one day. When Claire thought that Moira died, or when Neil betrayed her, yes, she cried, but she didn't cry nearly as severely as when Steve died. Claire views all of these mentioned people, except Steve, as surrogate brothers and sisters, but Steve is the one that made her the happiest, and Steve is the one whose loss made her cry the hardest. You cannot be dumb enough to still think that Claire saw Steve as a sibling. Furthermore, yes, Steve also had family-related trauma just like Sherry. Steve lost both parents just like Sherry, but Claire treated Sherry like her younger sister before the information that Sherry lost both her parents. Claire never treats Steve like a younger brother. You don't believe me? Look, even when you take so long to save Steve's life in that Gold Luger's retrieval part, and Steve collapses on the floor, Claire never once asks, is Steve okay? Or even checks up on him, or even goes close to him. She just watches, notices the guns, and says, oh yeah, give me those guns.
I made it. That was too close. What took you so long?
Oh, I need those. Give them to me.
Even when Steve saves Claire's life from the Snatcher, Claire focuses on the Lugers. This means that at this point, Claire is tolerating Steve, and to an extent, Steve is even tolerating Claire. It's only after the information that Steve was mentally very wounded that Claire actually starts to care about him. I still don't understand. Where does this younger brother thing come from when we clearly see that Claire never acts like an elder sister to Steve? The only answer is love interest. And this is what I mean by Steve meant something to her that no other person meant to her. And furthermore, people, I'm actually losing YouTube subscribers because I'm pointing out something blatantly obvious so many times, which goes against the Western narrative. Even people like Scorpion figured out that in Degeneration, Claire acts weaker, mentally weaker compared to the start of CVX. But Scorpion didn't figure out why. Someone mentioned that after all the trouble she went through to find Chris, she didn't want to be in a biohazard again. And that's why those reactions. This is extremely inaccurate, not only because there is no evidence for this, but all of the strange behaviors, the involuntary reactions in Degeneration that scrambles her thinking momentarily, and even the weight gain can be connected to a response to losing Steve, along with a response to something he did or said, or the environment, or just a side effect of severe depression. All of it to do with Steve, not Chris, thus invalidating that, oh, she went through a lot of trouble to find Chris, so she didn't want to go through that again. Invalidating that argument. I'm not even going to fully elaborate the fact that for other people like Chris, Jill, Leon, so on and so forth, a lot of their endings ended in a negative way, as in with loss, betrayal, or both. Only Claire, for her, it ended in somewhat of a positive way where she reunited with her brother. But everyone else, it made them stronger, except Claire. Hell, in Code Veronica, Chris finds that Wesker is alive and is a monster. And does it make Chris weaker? It literally makes him stronger, and he becomes Big Papa Pump Chris Redfield. Bitch! And the only explanation is that Claire lost Steve, and as a result, views Code Veronica as a failure for her. This part is also a little bit of my deep psychological analysis. To further Claire's association of biohazards with losing Steve, let's go back to this clip in Degeneration.
No way. This can't be happening.
One of my commenters said that this is because Claire didn't see zombies for such a long time, and that is why she was acting traumatized. With all due respect, my friend, that is inaccurate. Claire already saw multiple zombies before that plane crash. Before even running into Curtis Miller, Claire actually saw zombies kill people. But that didn't stop Claire from running into the airport looking for Ronnie, whereas everyone else was running out of the airport. This is a very strong reference to her big sister protective instinct of Resident Evil 2. But once Steve's memory got triggered,
Please, help me.
Attention.
Claire saw more zombies. She stops looking for Ronnie, and then she gives this reaction with a facial expression as if she's about to cry. This shows you, being in a biohazard, how easily even things that are mundane has a possibility of reminding her of Steve. This also tells you that the impact of losing Steve was so severe that for that moment it overrode such a strong protective big sister instinct of hers, which Capcom used the entirety of Resident Evil 2 to establish. Losing Steve was a stronger impulse. And this is why, when it got triggered, it overrode her big sister instinct. And that is why, for that moment, she stops looking for Ronnie. And I have shown in my Degeneration review, this tells you why she didn't join the BSAA. Put all of this together, everything I've presented in this chapter, and the answer is Claire definitely loves Steve too by the end. And this is the universal explanation that explains all of Claire's peculiar behaviors post CVX. Not to my surprise, the Japanese audience got it immediately that Code Veronica is a love story that ends in tragedy. And actually, from what I read, Code Veronica might be actually more popular with Japanese women instead of men. And as I have mentioned time and time again, Capcom failed in their execution, but this was definitely what they were going for. This is why this discovery is not fan theory. Something with such a mountain of evidence behind it cannot be fan theory. If Capcom ends up making a placeholder game that reunites Claire and Chris, but also has Wesker, Rodrigo, and the Ashfords, but no Steve, that is completely fine. But that is not Code Veronica.